Joint Election Commission, Additional Election Commissioner of Bihar, as well as he is chairman of South Bihar Power Distribution Company. So, you please take over the session.
Thank you. For this session, we have two presentations, one by Mr. Nick Ryan. He is a research program director for IGC Energy Research Program. He holds a PhD degree in economics from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is currently the Cowell's Foundation Fellow and Assistant Professor of Economics at Yale University. He has been a Prize Fellow in Economics at Harvard University. He studies energy markets and environmental regulation in developing countries. His research measures how energy use and pollution emissions respond to regulation and market incentives. In fact, over the last 1 year or so, he has been working with us as well, the Bihar energy distribution companies. So in that way, like, we have had quite a few interactions with Mr. Nick. I would say the initiatives which we have been, taking on a pilot basis to see how people or the markets respond to revenue-linked supply scheme. That's been quite a learning experience for us as well. And the other panelists who will have a presentation on settlement of land to Mahadalits, Mr. Himanshu Kumar. He holds a PhD degree in economics from Delhi School of Economics and is affiliated with Center of Development Economics at DAC. His work includes evaluation of land transfer programs to Mahadalits in Bihar. And as a discussant, we have Mr. Abhinav. Abhinav is an assistant professor in Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Florida. His research interests are development economics, housing policy, transportation, and urban and regional economics. So broadly, like, just a few opening remarks on the energy front. I've been working in this sector for the last 1 year or so. It has been universally acknowledged that per capita power consumption and the well-being of an economy or people are closely related. There is a large degree of positive correlation. And within India also this can be seen. Overall, our national per capita consumption is around 1000 kilowatt hour per annum. Whereas Bihar is at around, as per the latest figures for last year, 2014-15, it is 204 units per year. So that significantly shows where Bihar is. But at the same time, I would like to stress upon, in 2011-12, the per capita consumption was 120 units per hour, per annum, which is increased to 204 in the last 4 years. The pertinent point is, like, across India and especially the western and southern states, where the industrial load and agricultural load account for a significant portion of the per capita consumption. Normally, like, it is 40% industrial, 20% agriculture, and 40% is domestic. Whereas in Bihar, 20% is industrial, 5 to 6% is agricultural load, and balance 75% is more or less domestic load. So that is one area, which clearly shows where we are and the steps that we need to take to move forward. And more or less on the domestic consumption front, we have been able to improve consumption by close to 80% over the last 4 years. And in terms of investment in this sector over the last 3 years, both the central government as well as the state government has come forward. And just to state a figure, in 2005, the maximum demand that Bihar state met was around 700 megawatt. And this year we have met a demand of 3000 megawatts. That is the peak demand that we have achieved this year. So close to 4 to 4.5 times increase over the last 10 years in terms of supplying electricity. Accordingly, all the distribution, transmission and generation infrastructures have been taken care of. But still there is a long way to go. I will not take more time at this point. I would request Mr. Nick Ryan to start with this presentation. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the introduction. As noted, I'm going to be talking about lighting up Bihar, and I call it a progress report because though we've been working with both the North and South Bihar power distribution companies for about a year and a half now, a little bit more than that, this project is still ongoing, and we view it as really a long-term sort of collaboration during this sort of exciting period of rapid power supply growth in the state. So as motivation, there is a very strong relationship indeed between power consumption per capita and economic sort of income, GDP per capita. So this is from 2010. The data is slightly out of date, but you can see essentially there's a large cloud of lower income countries which are almost clustered on top of one another, and then all of the sort of higher income levels up to $40,000 per capita and beyond of national income have much higher power consumption. And it's unusual you see such a strong relationship, and where there's basically no exception in the world. So there's not a single country that is reaching the higher ranks of development and national income without a significant increase in power consumption. And here in this figure, you can't sort of see much differentiation, but you can zoom in. So this is zooming in by sort of a factor of 3. And then this is where India is placed, again, as of 2010. So on a per capita basis, the consumption has grown from about 700 to maybe 1,000 units per annum. And the basic sort of question is, well, this is a correlation, but we know that many other things go along with growth. Countries with higher income would consume more of basically every product. So the sort of economic interest is, well, does power supply cause growth actually? Can it be a sort of push factor where supplying greater power will lead to greater business productivity, education, health, and so forth, and thereby sort of generate income in the future? And the best evidence we have comes from one of my colleagues at Yale, Mushfiq Mubarak, and his co-authors, who studied the electrification of Brazil in the period from the 1960s onwards. And the basic idea was that they looked at where did the electricity grid come up, and what were the sort of changes in property values, income, health, and various other indicators after that. And what they found was very remarkable. It's not only that there was some sort of positive return for business productivity, but as best as they can measure, there's also some external return. So they call it as external, meaning that if I am a business and I get connected, I'll have some profit increase, some productivity gain, but it's external because that will also benefit other people. So that will benefit the income of the people who can come to my shop, the people I might employ, and other parties who are not directly consuming the power. And because they're working at a very large scale, looking at whole of Brazil, they can't really put the finger on how does this external return happen. That is, what generates the social return from electrification. And so that's one of the goals in this project, is basically to try to put the finger on what are the exact channels through which these productivity benefits can accrue from an improvement of electricity supply. And Bihar, sort of as noted, has recognized this, that power is essential for economic development, and basically as one of the highest priority sectors in the state. So very last several years this increase has been going on, and I think there'll be additional investment in the sector in the next 5 years or a decade. Just yesterday there was inaugurated a large grant from the center under the successor program to RGGVY, under which I think there would be a lot of investment in distribution to try to increase electricity access. That said, this is on the sort of access side and the benefits of supply. We know that power ultimately does not come for free. So there needs to be revenue to pay for this power. And oftentimes in Indian states, that aspect has been neglected. So the idea of this Lighting Up Bihar collaboration between sort of economists and the experts in the distribution companies to try to see how can these commercial factors and revenue generation be taken into account from the very first as the state is expanding supply. And the importance of that is clear if you actually survey the sector more broadly and look at states like Rajasthan or Tamil Nadu, which have increased supply to some extent, but at the cost of basically jeopardizing the rest of their state development agenda because they're generating tens of thousands of crores in losses from electricity subsidies. So in this case, we're going to sort of pilot schemes which would increase supply but also increase revenue simultaneously. And first, before getting into the research design and the results we have so far, I just want to give some of the actual figures documenting the remarkable progress in the last several years. So first, on the power availability side, this is just sort of basically what is the load on the grid in an average hour. And I don't go back as to 2007, but in 2012, that was about 1,200 megawatts for all of Bihar. In 2014, that doubled. So this is a 2-year period, so that's basically 50% growth year on year. And then 2015, again, it is increased, and this is not even reaching to the highest peak level, 3,000 or 3,200 megawatts, which was mentioned. So there's just been an enormous sort of explosion of power being purchased, produced, and injected into the grid. Now, on the other side, that power flows out to customers, and some revenue should flow back. So it's important to track how many customers are actually connected, and what are they sort of paying for this power. So on the side of total customers, the first bar on the left-hand side, so in 2012 there are 40 lakh customers. That increased to 47 and now to 60 lakh customers. So again, 50% growth in 2 years. And this is energy access. So this is more people getting connected. And that's an important distinction because in many cases, and if you look at the broad sort of sweep in India in the last 20 years plus, the electrification rate, the number of people connected has been flat, even as the power availability, the power injected into the grid has increased. That is, more people are consuming more, running ACs, running larger televisions, but not necessarily more people connected. Whereas here in Bihar, you see more people are getting connected to the grid. So then the next group of bars is how many of those customers are metered. So not all customers are metered because there are certain categories which might be billed on flat rate or because there's just incomplete coverage for categories that in fact should be metered. But that has also been increasing, and now the gap is quite small. So it's reached to 52 lakh metered customers. There's only 7 lakh that are not. Now then, installing the meters is one thing, but you must read them to issue bills and accurately know where's the consumption and make an energy accounting of where does your power flow. So the number of meter readings is much lower, but has increased over time to some extent, although perhaps not as strongly as the connection to the grid. And then finally, those customers with the meters read and the bills issued should pay their bills. So the number of paying customers has increased in the last several years, although the last year's increase was quite modest. So corresponding to this increase in power availability, I would say there's a large increase in access and some increase in sort of metering, certainly, so much more information, but tapering off as far as the actual meter readings and the number of customers who are paying. And the result is that the revenue is basically reflecting this average transmission and distribution losses, which still remain rather high. So this is the share of power, which is essentially not paid or otherwise accounted for, and it's at maybe 45, 46%, which is fairly steady. So this said, the expansion in access has happened, is happening. So the fact that these losses have not even raised is itself beneficial, but one would like to see them going down. So the question then is there a strategy, is there a way to try to continue this growth in access without running into fiscal risk?
Just, sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
if I may,
please.
for the better understanding of the audience, can we just go back to? Yeah. Basically on this losses, just I would like to supplement. Probably like the losses were around 58 or somewhere, 58%. And at present, like the latest year, we are somewhere at around 42, 43%. It has come down by close to 15%. But then over the last 3 years, what is happening is, in terms of like expanding the network to rural areas, we have been able to increase power supply to rural areas where earlier it was probably like 7, 8 hours. Now it is close to 16 hours, and in some places even as high as 18 and 20 hours. But over the years, since rural supply was very negligible, the system for revenue collection, metering and other things were not in place. So practically what is happening is more power supply is getting into rural areas where we don't have adequate infrastructure on the commercial side in terms of metering and collection and all that. And on the other side, our average cost of power purchase was 1.8 rupees in 2005-06. And consistently that has gone up. In the last year, our power purchase cost is around 4.2 or 4.5. Almost 2.5 to 3 times the power purchase cost is increased. And the new supplies which are coming in the last year we had BARD and other power generation plants coming in at 6 rupees. So practically our new sources of power supply are costlier, and the costlier power is getting into rural area more than urban area. In rural area, it's still a challenge for us where we are working on, where we have inadequate collection infrastructure and commercial infrastructure. So that is actually is a serious challenge which we are facing, and we are taking various measures to address that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. That's exactly right. So then this is basically the question is this goal of electricity access is very difficult to achieve given the sort of low rate of payment in certain areas, rural areas especially. So this is sort of this basically design of the scheme that we're working on jointly with the distribution companies to try to see if this expansion could be made more remunerative, basically, so that it could be fiscally sustained. And just before reaching the design of the scheme, it's useful to have a primer on what does the electricity grid look like at some level. So because the metering infrastructure at the customer level is not quite complete, those lowest levels in the picture on the left, the home and the factory and so forth, the idea of this scheme is to go up a little bit in the grid to what's called a feeder. So if you go up one step, you reach a transformer, which is where the power is stepped down to 220 volts to come into your home. If you go up one step beyond that, you reach a feeder at 11 kilovolts, 11,000 volts. And that feeder will serve about 2,000 customers on average. And the advantage of sort of basing a scheme or linking a scheme at that level is that the feeders have a much higher rate of metering, and you can control the power supply at that level also. They can be turned on and off. So the idea of this scheme is basically to look at these feeders in districts across Bihar and group them by the share of revenue or the revenue share of cost. So if you are paying enough to cover the cost of supply to that area, you would have 100% and you would come in the top bin. In fact, looking at the sort of left-hand side, for a rural area, you only need to cover 40% of cost to come in the top performing bin, and you would get 18 hours of power supply per day. If you were between 20 and 30% of cost coverage, you would get 14 hours per day, and so forth if the revenue rate were lower. So this range of power supply is prescribed separately for rural and urban areas, and the schedules, the actual classification of what bin you fall in, would be updated on a monthly basis. So the benefits are in principle twofold. The first benefit is that just immediately, if you change where the power is flowing so that more megawatts go to places which are paying more on average, you're going to increase your revenue because you'll reweight the units to areas that have a higher payment in rupees per unit. The second benefit in the longer term, and this is sort of why this is a long-term project, is that you should hopefully change the social dynamic orientation, provide an incentive for areas over time to acknowledge that it's basically within local control, that if they increased payment, they would move up this schedule and get additional hours of supply. So this is basically what I described, the design of the scheme, and this is not altering at all the average level of supply at about 14 hours in rural areas. It's just sort of spreading it out across these bins. And this is the sort of diagram for how the scheme would be rolled out. So initially, because the rate of metering at the feeder level was incomplete, we've begun this scheme just in North Bihar with the 79 feeders in 4 districts where we're working that were metered. So of course you need to measure energy in order to measure what is the payment per unit of energy. But then sort of actually from sort of this month or next month, we would begin similarly in South Bihar for the metered feeders, and probably by the end of this year, the balance of the unmetered feeders could be brought in also. So the metering work is going on quite rapidly. It was just you need some baseline period over which the energy supply is measured in order to calculate, again, this revenue rate of rupees per kilowatt hour injected. And this would be the total coverage of 8 districts across North and South Bihar, and they're selected for sort of a high incidence of these non-paying or very low-paying rural areas. So now I'm going to talk about basically the experience of the first, say, 7-8 months, how the scheme has gone, what are the effects on hours of supply and on revenues. This is the distribution of the payment rate across these feeders. So it ranges on the horizontal axis from 0 to 100%, but you can see that the bulk of these feeders have revenue rates in the lowest bin. So that is between 0 and 10%, comprises about 35% of all of the feeders. That is, a third of the feeders are paying for less than 10% of the cost of supply. And that is the sort of fiscal challenge, that the more power that one supplies in those areas, the greater would be the fiscal losses and the burden on the government. This graph shows basically the concept of the scheme, and it's quite complicated, so I'm going to explain it sort of very slowly. Oh, well, maybe I won't. Yeah. So the idea, higher paying should have a higher allocation of power. So initially, before this began in 2014, that was not the case. There was almost no relationship between the power supply in an area and the rate of payment. It was basically flat or even somewhat negative. So what this sort of shows is, in the ideal case, if there were no relationship beforehand, but then every area snapped immediately to the assigned number of hours, then you would see a very sort of even distribution. You would see that the highest bin immediately had the highest number of hours and continued as such for some time, and the middle bin was sort of going to an intermediate number of hours and continuing as such. And in practice, what we see is there's some movement. These bins move towards their assignment, especially over the first 4 or 5 months of implementation, but that movement is incomplete. So I'll just go to the graph. For example, if this were the ideal case, this bin 5 is the highest paying bin. So you have to pay at least 40 or 50% of the cost of supply. If this were the ideal case, bin 5 in the first month of implementation would go up to the assigned number of hours, which is sort of 4 hours more than the average, and then it would continue on at that rate. And likewise, the sort of low-paying bin 1 would go to the bottom and just sort of stay there and move across. And what we see in practice is that there's definitely movement, but it's not sort of so rapid. It happens over time. So take an example of sort of perhaps bin 4. So bin 4 was initially maybe just getting about average, but it's paying more than average. So the idea is it should move up. And over time, it's sort of bouncing around, and now it's heading up. Now, bin 3 was paying somewhat in the middle at the baseline, but it was getting the most supply. So bin 3 should actually be getting more towards the middle, and indeed, it's come down. And the reason why these move is that the grid is not controlled in an automated fashion. You know, this is a sort of very detailed and hands-on exercise where a huge number of engineers in divisions, subdivisions, down to the substation level itself, who are controlling these feeders, are adopting and understanding how is the schedule working, and moving to adhere to that schedule over time. So it's just been a sort of great effort on the part of, in this case, the North Bihar Power Distribution Company to get the schedule into compliance. And the net result now, and what this graph shows, is basically how many more hours each feeder is getting if they were assigned one additional hour. So that is, if I was assigned +4, do I get +4? Do I get some fraction of that? And the scale on the left-hand side goes from -1 to 1. The idea being that if that coefficient is 1, then you get 1 hour for each hour assigned. So you get exactly the assignment that was due. If that coefficient is 0.5, then you get half an hour of additional power for each hour that was assigned, and so forth. So this is sort of an index or a ranking of what was the overall compliance across various bins. And you can see before the scheme started, as I said, it's even somewhat negative, which means that those areas that should have been getting more power were getting less, or those areas that were higher paying were getting less supply. But now, since the implementation began, it's moved up, and now the sort of line is at a higher level. It's about 0.3 or 0.4. So every hour of supply that you're assigned, because of paying more for your power, you're getting about 20 minutes or 25 minutes more supply. And for the top bin, that would mean if you were assigned 4 additional hours, you'd be getting a little less than 2 hours additional per day. Now, and sort of more importantly, does that move the revenue which is coming from these feeders? So the 2 lines here show what we call revenue rate, which again is the amount of payment divided by the cost of supply, which is just taken as a flat 5.5 rupees per unit. And you can see initially, this is basically the same in the treatment and the control feeders. So these feeders where the scheme is being implemented and comparable feeders where it is not. But then some separation opens up. So the blue line, the treatment line, is lying above the control line from the beginning of the implementation in November 2014 forwards. And it opens up to about 5 percentage points or so. So this is just the difference, which is how much more in percentage of cost terms are you getting from those feeders under this revenue-linked supply scheme, as opposed to those that were under the existing allocation of power. Now, this is a substantial increase in the sense that 5 percentage points on a base of about 16 percentage points is a big incremental improvement. However, because there were only about 77 feeders that were metered at the start, this is not quite statistically significant. So the treatment effect is estimated to be 4, but the standard error is also 4. So over time, and in those additional phases I mentioned, the sample will be expanded approximately 4-fold. And so any such increase, an increase of 25% or 4 percentage points, would, if it held up, be highly statistically significant in this larger sample. So then the sort of final question is, do we have anything to say thus far on the actual growth effects or benefits economically from electrification? Now, this experiment, it's an experiment, so the idea is that over time we'll try to see if these areas that are allocated more power are doing better and are using that to open businesses or improve their productivity. For now, we haven't actually followed it up on the ground, but we have extensive data from a baseline survey, which we conducted, of over 8,000 businesses and a comparable number of households in all the affected districts. So we'll be able to say not what is the necessarily effect of this scheme, but just what is the relation of power supply variation in Bihar to the productivity and the technology that these businesses are using. So firstly, our survey asked what was the power supply experience, how many hours of supply do you get, and because we also see what is the power coming from your feeder, we can relate these 2 measures. So one coming from the survey of the customer, and the second coming from the distribution company measure of the grid. And you can see they're highly correlated, although they're not exactly on the 45-degree line. In general, the customer measure which is on the horizontal axis, the survey report of hours of supply per day, is a bit lower than the grid report of hours of supply per day. That could be because people appear to have some grievance and report that supply is less. It could be because actually the supply is less because there are outages at the distribution transformer level or beneath the feeder level at which the grid supply is measured. But basically these are strongly, highly correlated. And we can then look at businesses in these different power supply situations, some that are getting 4 hours or 8 hours and some that are getting 20, and see how their expenditures vary on various electricity using items. So the basic question is, does power supply change the technology and therefore the productivity of businesses in different areas? And to look at this question, where we thought to start is the kind of canary in the coal mine approach, which is looking at those businesses that use the most power or spend the most on energy. So this graph shows a number of different sectors that we picked up in our survey sample, so like woodwork or electricity repair or mills, agricultural mills, and the share of energy expenditure in their costs. So the blue bar is the share that they've spent on diesel for lighting and energy. The red bar is on labor, and the green bar is on materials. And you see there's some sectors that are spending significant shares of their overall cost, 20 or 30%, but many sectors, including sort of milling and agricultural processing, that are spending maybe 10%. And then we want to look across the areas to see whether these high expenditure businesses operate in a different way when they actually get supply from the grid as opposed to just relying on their own diesel generating sets. Wrong way. And this is one other sector. This is just more personally concerning, but JPAL has an office in Patna as well. Patna has very good power supply, but still there are outages from time to time. So this just shows what we have spent on our own diesel expenditures over the course of this project thus far. So December 2014 in the winter, it fell down, but more recently we've been spending 20 or 30,000 rupees per month to keep the lights on in our project office here. So what is the sort of finding, or what is the result in the short term? We see there's actually a pretty substantial difference between how these businesses appear to operate in the same sectors in low versus high supply regimes. So low versus high supply, we divide at 15 hours, which is about the median supply. The red bar in each pair indicates ownership of certain appliances in the low supply regime, and the sort of purple or blue bar indicates ownership in the high supply regime. So if you look at the sort of left-hand side, an electric drill, the probability you have an electric drill in, again, these sectors, these manufacturing sectors, which should have drills, they should be doing metal work and woodwork, etc., is about 10% if you get less than 15 hours of supply per day, and almost 3 times as much if you get more than that. The sort of electric mill is not substantially different. Many people operate these even on diesel generators. It's almost something you can't do without. But similarly, electric saws and welding equipment and many other sort of items which we observe in the survey, they're just dominantly more used when grid supply is available. So this is hopeful to us. It's not sort of causal evidence on the effect of electricity supply on growth, but it's showing that for these same kinds of businesses, which are spending the most on energy and therefore have the most at stake, they change the technology with which they operate when supply is higher. And that's sort of what you want to see as a precondition for any sort of growth effect or growth benefit of electricity supply. So that's what we have done till date, and we're continuing to work with the power distribution companies. This scheme launched from September, from the end of 2014, and the expansion sort of from August and into December of this year should bring in an additional 200 plus feeders over the existing sample of about 77 feeders. And then we would plan an end-line survey to go back to all of these businesses and households that we visited once to measure what is the impact of the increase in supply which this scheme has brought about. So that is, the idea is to not only improve and help to improve the revenue situation and change the trade-off between revenue and electricity supply, but also to measure at the same time what is the benefit for the state. So thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have the second presentation, and after that we'll have the discussion.
So I'd like to, it's now for something, I guess, completely different. This presentation, I don't want to confuse you longer than necessary. This is not about, I'll try and be energetic in presenting it, but it's not about energy. It's about an IGC-funded project under which we've done this work. This is called Caste Connections and Government Transfers. We're looking at the Mahadalits of Bihar. I also, so I'm very grateful for IGC to IGC for funding this project, for inviting me here, Professor Anjan Mukherjee, and also for this to this August House for awarding a PhD to me. According to the Delhi School of Economics, that's still a few months away, but hopefully that's only a slight complication. Okay, in fact, this project is actually along with Rohini Somanathan, who is also supervising my PhD at the Delhi School. So without further ado, basically in this project, we want to think a little bit about, I guess, identity and the salience of various kinds of identity. In the context of caste, we are at the human level, in the lived reality of life, we are usually talking about what is known as jati, right? Brahmins, Rajputs. This is what endogamous groups are formed within. This is what determines, various kinds of lifestyles and opportunities and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the state of India sort of insists on clubbing together these groups into large agglomerations and calling them scheduled castes and scheduled tribes when it wants to do affirmative action, right? And so we want to try and think about, whether individual jati is actually salient and it's important to look at that or not, or is it just okay to just treat these as sort of overall agglomerations, okay? So the particular thing that we do in the context of this study is that we are looking at a program run by the government of Bihar. What the government of Bihar did in 2007 is it designated a subgroup of scheduled castes as the most oppressed, the Mahadalits, and appointed a Vikas Mitra in every panchayat of the state. The Vikas Mitra is actually appointed, he's a resident of the panchayat, and he's from amongst the Mahadalits. In fact, he's from the largest Mahadalit caste in the panchayat. And then we use a household survey in 4 districts of Bihar to ask the question that, does it help households to belong to the same jati, the specific jati, as the Vikas Mitra? Okay, so that's really the way we will be proceeding. So it's based on a primary survey that was funded by the IGC, which was done in 2013. The arc of this talk, I will briefly just talk about evolution of caste inequalities over time, discuss the Mahadalit mission in Bihar, the Vikas Mitra program, a few notes about survey design and empirical strategy. Then the results, we looked at a bunch of government programs, because what the Vikas Mitra is supposed to be doing is enabling households to get better access to a variety of existing government programs, right? Most of my discussion, however, will be about one specific program, which is one of the most important ones the Vikas Mitra is involved with, which is this flagship housing program called the Indira Awas Yojana, which I'm sure everybody in this room is very familiar with. Then we'll do a few checks and a few extensions, and I'll conclude with some Rather speculative remarks, I would say. So this is, I hope these are clear out here. It's actually slightly less clear on my screen than perhaps it is on these large ones. So I'm tracking just the overall evolution of education levels in India. This is using census data between 1961 and 2001. The education data for 2011 is not fully available as yet. And so we're looking at the left side is primary education and above, attainment of primary education, and on the right is matriculation. And these are the standard sort of three groups that we are used to talking about most of the time as economists, which are scheduled castes, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and others. Right? These are the sort of three agglomerations that we talk about all the time. And sort of predictably, the STs are at the bottom, the scheduled castes are in red in the middle, and the others are sort of way up. Right? If we had been able to disaggregate this area, it's worth remembering that the others include not just upper caste Hindus, but also Muslims, whom we know have lower socioeconomic outcomes and so on. So if you think about upper caste Hindus, the lines would actually be far above this. It's just that the census does not actually specifically look at those things. And so, across these groups, it's very clear, across these big agglomerations, the hierarchies have been very stable over time. Right? There's very little evidence that there is any sort of convergence between these groups. If you did look at literacy and stuff, you'd find some degree of convergence, but if you look at anything above primary, there's really no convergence that we can yet talk about amongst these three groups. Okay? But I want to drill down further and look at individual jatis within the scheduled caste. These are actually tracked in the census documents. And so I again look at the same education levels between 61 and 2001. And what you find, and this is quite incredible, is that even at the level of these individual jatis, okay, so I'm looking at some of the largest jatis that are present in North India and in Bihar. These are the Dhobis, Chamars, Dusads, also known as the Paswans, the Pasis, and the Musahars. And there's almost no crossing happening out here, right? These are very, very stable hierarchies. Everybody has done better over time. There has been an improvement in everyone's levels. Well, with the possible exception of the Musahars, who almost are like a flat line at the bottom, right? So the Musahars are doing really badly. The others have gained, but the hierarchy remains surprisingly stable. Right? Which is to say there's something really to be looked at when we need to worry about these individual jatis. It's not, this is not just one homogeneous group where, where the lines were crossing and things like that. You would think that, there's nothing which is very specific to the ascriptive nature of those castes that is doing things. And the next graph, which looks almost identical, is just the same jatis in Bihar, right? So exactly the same out here as the others. So just to motivate the idea that we really need to worry, we need to think about these inequalities, we need to think about individual jatis from the perspective of overall inequalities. So this is, it's not as if India has been completely blind to these ideas. There have been several states, notably Punjab, Haryana, and Andhra Pradesh, who have tried to say, okay, let's try and do, let's look at overall affirmative action, but then let's try and subcategorize these groups and say not just that we should have 15% reservations for, and in India, of course, as we know, almost all affirmative action is in the form of reservations and quotas, right, in government jobs and in the election system and in education and so on. So the idea has been that the attempts that were made by these states were to say let's subcategorize and let's set aside a certain percentage of quotas for the groups that are just lagging behind even amongst these, right? But the Supreme Court actually struck all of these initiatives down in 2004. So starting from 2004, all of these have been essentially put to an end, okay? Except the state of Bihar, where when Nitish Kumar came in 2005, soon after that, he set up something called the Bihar State Mahadalit Commission. There had been a civil society sort of uprising out here, a demand for affirmative action for the Mahadalits, and in particularly for the Musahars, okay? This Mahadalit Commission was set up to identify the castes which are the most oppressed and to look at their status and to recommend programs for them. So what happened soon after, between 2008 and 2009, is that overall Bihar has 22 castes. And in 2008, 18 of these castes, which represented 28% of the SC population, and it included the Musahars, most importantly, they were classified as Mahadalit. The year after, so a few months after that actually, the Dhobis and Pasis were also added in. That was another 10% of the total. And finally, in 2009, the Chamars were also added in. So if you're quick with your math, what this means is at this point, basically there is only one caste which is non-Mahadalit amongst the SCs of Bihar, right? But it's not a trivial caste. It is the Dusas, the little portion, the portion which is exploded out of this pie. This is the overall distribution in the scheduled castes of Bihar, of individual castes. So basically, if you went in an anti-clockwise direction, the pie up till Musahars is the first 18 groups which were included, and then the Dhobis and Pasis, then the Chamars, and the Dusads are still out of there. So it's only one caste, but it is 31% of the SC population, right? So it's pretty sort of substantial, okay? So that's the Mahadalit mission, and they recommended various programs to be started for these Mahadalits. And one of the one which we will be studying primarily is this program for called the Vikas Mitra, the appointment of Vikas Mitras. So I've said some of this before, but to repeat, the Vikas Mitras are appointed from the largest Mahadalit caste of the panchayat. There's one per panchayat all over, so that means there's about 10,000 of them all over the state. And they were appointed in 4 rounds. Matriculation was required initially, then they had to lower the educational requirements because they couldn't find people who were matriculates. The inviolable rule is the first one. Okay, you will always hire from the largest Mahadalit caste. If you can't find anybody, as might happen if that panchayat is reserved for a woman Vikas Mitra and also for the Musahar caste or something like that, it's very unlikely that you'll find a class 10 pass. You will go down the list. You will lower the education levels, but you will not switch to picking up somebody from another caste. Okay, so you can only hire from the largest caste. These are contractual workers. Their pay is not performance linked. It's fixed wages, which at the time they started were 3,000 and has been sort of built up over time, right? And basically they have been placed under, de facto, they've been sort of placed under the block development officers, right? So they're at the beck and call of the BDOs to help out with all sorts of government programs, yeah? Okay, so what do we do? We looked at this rule, the fact that the Vikas Mitra is hired from the largest Mahadalit caste. And we wanted to, of course, look at whether Vikas Mitras, whether being from that caste would mean from the Vikas Mitra you would get more access to program benefits than people of other castes, right? Now, when you're thinking about that, one immediate issue that comes into mind is that, well, if this is the largest Mahadalit caste of the panchayat, it's probably politically more salient. It might be able to have better access to government programs, quite irrespective of the appointment of the Vikas Mitra, right? So that's really the first consideration which drove our empirical strategy, which was we said, okay, let's try and find panchayats where you have 2 large sort of Mahadalit caste groups which are relatively equally sized. Okay, and for that, of course, we needed data on the populations of Mahadalits at the panchayat level, which there is no such data available publicly. Okay. So we try and get to a sample of that sort where there are 2 large, relatively equally sized Mahadalit castes. Then we think that between them you can argue that the sort of allocation of the Vikas Mitra caste is sort of pseudo-random in a certain sense. And we try and estimate the probability of program access as a function of a bunch of household and panchayat characteristics. And of course, the crucial thing being the jati match with the Vikas Mitra. Right? And then we'll do some robustness checks and things of that sort. So overall sampling design, I'll just go through this very quickly. Basically, our selection of districts, we picked 4 districts. It was driven purely by data considerations. When Vikas Mitras were being hired, the government asked for information on Mahadalit populations, which is the largest Mahadalit caste. So so most of the DMs across the state basically just sent the name of the largest caste in every panchayat to the central body, which is the Bihar Mahadalit Vikas Mission, a few DMs went out of their way and produced a list of actually the number of households. They asked for a quick survey and the number of households of these panchayats. So there were 3 such districts. We picked those, and we were really wanting to do Gaya as well because Gaya has the largest, numerically the largest SC population as well as the largest fraction of SCs in Bihar. So it's sort of an obvious place to be studying scheduled castes. It's an obvious place not to avoid when you're studying scheduled castes, I would say. And so, and we wanted some diversity in the caste of the Vikas Mitra and all of those things. Bottom line, without going into too many details, what we have is we looked at 4 districts. We picked up 12 panchayats out of each of these 4 districts, which gives us 48 panchayats and therefore 48 Vikas Mitras in our sample. And then in each of these panchayats, we sampled 48 households from two villages because we wanted some dispersion in terms of proximity to the Vikas Mitra, in terms of distance to the Vikas Mitra. And then a couple of our districts, we found some scheduled tribes as well, and so we picked up some of there. So overall, we have about 2,400 households, of which about 57% are Mahadalit. Okay? And these are our districts. We are sort of quite nicely, even though this, like I said, this was purely on data considerations that we ended up picking these districts, but we ended up being fairly nicely spread out over Bihar. We have Gopalganj on the west. We have Katehar bordering West Bengal, and then we have Nalanda and Gaya in the south, and those little yellow dots are actually the villages that we ended up sampling. The caste distribution across these districts is rather, is very different. So Gopalganj is very dominated by Chamars. For example, Gaya, on the other hand, is very heavily dominated by Musahars or Bhuyas, as they're also known as. And then Katehar and Nalanda have, mix that you can see out here. So the pies are the Mahadalit population fractions, and the Vikas Mitras that we picked up, those are the bars that you're seeing next to them. So you can see, broadly speaking, where in Gopalganj, if there were lots of Chamars, we ended up with lots of Chamar Vikas Mitras. If in Gaya there are lots of Musahars, we also ended up with a large number of Musahar Vikas Mitras, right? So most of our Vikas Mitras, indeed 38 out of 48, are actually either Chamar or Musahar, right? And if you actually go back to this kind of graph which I draw, there's a rather sort of stark difference between the two, right? So, Dhobis are right at the top out there, Musahars are right at the bottom, and the Chamars are sort of the second after the Dhobis in this. Okay, so there's a fairly large difference in the census in the socioeconomic outcomes of these two sorts of groups. Yeah. Okay, so and if you look at the sample, and you break it up by caste, you can see a lot of these socioeconomic outcomes being sort of fairly different across these important castes, right? So take your pick. If you want to look at, for example, the rate of matriculation, which is if there's at least one adult household member who's matriculated, as much as 30% of our households, of our Chamar households, have that kind of high level. But on the other hand, only less than 5% of the Musahars in our sample have matriculated, right? Casual labor, again, you can see it's sort of very different. The highest rates is for the Musahars. Landlessness is massively higher in the Musahars compared to the Chamars. And feel free to look down towards the right and look at some of the other caste groups as well. And so these are the kinds of household characteristics that we will actually have in our we do an imputed BPL score as well. 13 and below is the cutoff in Bihar for being below the poverty line. Of course, the BPL stuff has been now revised with taking into account the SECC data, but we're talking about 2013 when we were still following the old BPL lists. Okay, so those are some of the things. I will not actually get really into the estimation equation or the logit or the results in terms of the full regressions. Suffice to say that we have a binary dependent sort of variable, and we are going to be doing a bunch of logit regressions to get our results. And the bottom line is that if you look at in terms of predicted probabilities of getting Indira Awas, this is sort of how it breaks down. These are logit margins. So, amongst the entire population, The red bar out here is for households whose caste, whose jati is different from the Vikas Mitra, and the blue lines are going to be the ones which are matched, which have the same jati as the Vikas Mitra, right? So you can see there's a clear difference, and if I'd shown you the logit results before, you would have seen this sort of, we have triple star significance out here in terms of these differences. The people who are of the same caste as the Vikas Mitra do substantially better, right? And the reason there are 3 sets of bars out there is we are looking at Chamar Vikas Mitras separately and Musahar Vikas Mitras separately as well, right? And so, because, you know, one of the things you're also interested in when you're looking at affirmative action is this sort of whole trade-off between equity and efficiency and that sort of a thing, right? You might think our Musahar Vikas Mitras are less educated and so on compared to the Chamar Vikas Mitras. And yet, you know, when you look at this bar and some of the ones which are going to come, in terms of how much access they're able to provide households, I mean, how well households in their panchayats do, they're not really very different, which is actually quite interesting, okay, to me. Because I would have expected Musahar Vikas Mitras to do much worse. They have lower social standing, they're much less educated, all of those things, right? But they don't seem to do badly at all compared to the Chamar Vikas Mitras. And so this is just a very quick slide, and unfortunately, it's not in terms of bar graphs. This is the only, you know, logit results or whatever that I'll show you without a nice bar graph to accompany it. But this is just to say that if you, it's a bit interesting. If you break it down, right, if you don't look at it just in terms of a binary, that it's either you're matched with the Vikas Mitra or you're not, right? But you break it down a little bit more. We can't do it too much because we lose power and stuff. But so if the base category is being Mahadalit and not matched, right? Compared to that, the odds of getting Indira Awas are more than twice if you are actually Mahadalit and of the same jati as the Vikas Mitra. Remember, the Vikas Mitra is a Mahadalit, right? So now, if you break down the others a little bit, Dusads, who are basically, these are SCs but not Mahadalits, right? And then we have non-SCs, right? So the upper caste Hindus, STs, Muslims, etc. in our group. What's interesting is out here, the only significant coefficient really is on matched Mahadalit, right? So it's a bit like saying that if the Vikas Mitra, if your household belongs to the same jati as the Vikas Mitra, you do substantially better. But if you're not of that jati, whether you are another Mahadalit, whether you are an SC, which is to say a Dusad but not Mahadalit, right? Or whether you are non-SC, you do equally poorly. Okay, so if this is being, I don't know if right now, I don't know if if this is a bit too early to be persuaded that this is the Vikas Mitra's sort of preference or something operating out here, but it would seem to suggest that whatever it is sort of operating very much at the jati level of the Vikas Mitra and not at these aggregates beyond that. Okay. Okay. Right. So very quickly, again, just because we wanted to, this is not an experiment, which most of you have been presenting on. I feel a bit, shy coming in here with an observational study. So this is, what we tried to do is we said, okay, maybe we did a reasonable job of looking at panchayats which are closer, which have two groups, large Mahadalit groups which are close to each other. But let's look at the subsample of panchayat, within our, let's order our 48 panchayats, and let's look at the 24 panchayats, the half of the sample, which is even better, which is even closer, right? Or these two groups are even closer. And we find that the difference between the matched and the unmatched groups is as big, if not bigger, in this set. Okay? So this is just in the form of a robustness check. Another sort of robustness check. If you look at the first line, the first row of this, one is the logit odds ratio of access. That's a binary variable, whether you're getting access to Indira Awas or not. That's actually the same thing that you saw in the graphs before. That's just a numerical representation of the same thing, okay? Don't worry about that. It's not just in terms of the binary variable, but those households that do get Indira Awas, okay? That's the second column now I'm talking about, the last column on the right. They get substantially more money in the Indira Awas. Okay. Conditional on getting Indira Awas, the households which are matched with the Vikas Mitra also get a much larger amount, right? So the mean amount that people are getting in the Indira Awas in my sample is about 32,000, right? And this is an improvement of 5,000 that you get. So it's a very substantial number, okay? Also, I did ask a question about, whether, what kind of, did you get Indira Awas, when did you get it, and did you get it before? So if I look at the set before 2012, these Vikas Mitras were actually started being appointed in 2011-12, but from I did a bunch of interviews with them, and it was very clear, they all told me that in the first year, they were just finding their feet. They weren't even told by the government what they were supposed to be doing, right? So I'm looking at, I did the survey in 2013. I'm going to look at 2012-13 as the year immediately preceding my survey, as the year when the Vikas Mitra was active, and the part before that as being a time when the Vikas Mitras were not active. Okay? So just to again say that this is not something hopefully spurious that we are picking up, but if you look at Indira Awas access before 2012, in the period when the Vikas Mitras were not active, you don't find these differences between the people who are of the same jati as the Vikas Mitra and who are not. Okay? This is just to try and persuade you that we have picked up something which is a true effect out here. Okay. If you break down a little bit about this Vikas Mitra, what kind of assistance and help, etc., is going on, looking a little bit deeper into that, we asked people if they even tried to get access to Indira Awas, right? So apart from succeeding in getting access to Indira Awas, we don't find any statistically significant difference between the people who are of the Vikas Mitras jati and the others in terms of how frequently they said they tried to get access to Indira Awas. Okay? What we do find is statistically significant difference in them actually getting Indira Awas and statistically significant difference in being helped, in telling us that they were helped by the Vikas Mitra. Okay? So people of the Vikas Mitra jati did not try more often to get Indira Awas, but they succeeded in getting Indira Awas much more often, and they also got helped by the Vikas Mitra much more often. They told us that they were helped by the Vikas Mitra much more often. Okay? The Vikas Mitra seems to be pretty effective. So if you look, this graph is basically telling you about, we asked households about who helped you get access. If you got, if you said that you tried to get Indira Awas, whose help did you get in doing this, right? So we have a bunch of officials, including the BDO and the Pradhan and the ward Sadasya and the old Pradhan and whatnot, right, that people told us about. If you look at that distribution, the probability that you succeeded in getting Indira Awas, conditional on the fact that you tried to get Indira Awas, is the lowest if you get no help, right? That's sort of to be expected. It's 45% if you said that you were helped only by the Vikas Mitra, if you named only the Vikas Mitra. We gave them the chance to tell us about at least about up to 5 people who helped them. Okay, get access. If you look at the only Vikas Mitra, he himself seems to be able to deliver this massive bar, which is 45. Indeed, when the Vikas Mitra acts in tandem with other people, if other people were also helping out, the Mukhya, whatever else, that probably doesn't change much at all. It goes from 45% to 49%, but that's not statistically significant, that difference. Okay? And finally, if only others were helped, if you said you were helped, but not by the Vikas Mitra, by other people, that's much lower, and statistically much, much lower. Okay? So just to put a little bit of flesh on this, just so you know, bring it to real life, what is the kind of help that Vikas Mitras are doing? I think that they're filling a crucial information gap. These are people, Mahadalits, who are largely illiterate, very poor, don't ever go to a BDO office or whatever it is. They have very poor knowledge of government programs and how to figure out the mechanics of getting access to them. So giving information seems to be a really big deal for these people. In addition, they help with all the various nitty-gritty tasks which you and I might take for granted, but which for an illiterate person are absolutely humongous obstacles, right? So just things related to literacy, right? Filling up the application, even getting the application, submitting the application at the office, withdrawing cash from the bank. These are not people who have passports and voter ID cards and driving licenses in their pockets. Somebody needs to authenticate them when they go to a bank. Okay? That work the Vikas Mitra is helping out with, in helping in opening a bank account. For the large transfers, they're all being made through banks. Just getting a photograph made, getting various certificates made. So those are the kinds of help that the Vikas Mitra is actually giving these people. Remember, he's not an official who can grant you a program. He's actually helping you in that process. Okay? That's the sort of thing which is going on. Okay. So, fine, we've talked about Vikas Mitra, this, that. Now, is this is this all just about proximity? Okay, is this about proximity that people, obviously people who belong to the Vikas Mitra's caste, given the structure of Indian villages, are more likely to live in the Vikas Mitra's village, in their hamlet and so on, live close by, right? So is it just about the fact that this being of the same caste as the Vikas Mitra is proxying for being geographically close to the Vikas Mitra? And I get sort of interesting, and I would love your sort of thoughts on this. The entire effect that we are getting of this Vikas Mitra helping people of his own jati much more than others is coming from the people he's helping in the other village. Okay? When we limit the sample to people who belong to the same village as the Vikas Mitra, you don't get this difference. Okay? Numerically, yes, that bar is a bit taller, but statistically, it's not significantly higher. The statistical significance, the huge jump, is in the other village. Okay? So it's as if, in my mind, it's as if we are thinking about here about what is the relevant sense of community. You know, when you're thinking of community, your village is community. Your panchayat is never your community. It's just too big and too widespread, right? So his community is either people of his own jati, even in other villages, or within his village, it's the entire village in a certain sense. Maybe that is what is going on. You could, if it's not preferences, you could build the other kind of story saying maybe that's the community that can discipline them. You know, and the village can sort of act as a, can discipline a Vikas Mitra and so can get better access to public goods or whatever from him, publicly provided goods, and people of his jati, even located outside of his village, can discipline. And so I'm not able to, I won't be able to say what story out here within this that we can tell. But this is sort of an interesting result to think about. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we make it a little quicker so that we'll have Mr.
Yes.
Abhinav and then some discussion on
Sure,
the
sure. Just these are my last two slides, and then I'm done. And also just to say, this is not the only program we looked at. We looked at a whole bunch of other programs the Vikas Mitra is involved with. Okay, these include the PDS. These include school transfers like school uniforms and scholarships. These include old age pensions. We don't find these effects in other programs. Right? In other programs, if you look at the bar, these pairs of bars, they're almost identically tall. Okay? So one needs to, at this point, I can only conjecture about the sort of things that may be at the heart of this. I don't know. The Indra Awas, of course, out of all of these programs, is this one large cash transfer. Right? More than any of these others. So in some sense, the stakes are the highest. It's also the one which is most rationed in a certain sense. Okay? Only a few people in any given year are going to be given Indra Awas. The demand far outstrips, the number of deserving eligible households far outstrips the supply of funds. Okay? The others are smaller, repeated transfers, and it doesn't work. But this is also not just a simple corruption story, okay? Because another initiative of the Bihar government was something called the Mahadalit Radio Yojana, which was the idea that every Mahadalit household should be provided with a radio, just so that they can hear the news and be better informed and so on. And so, of course, when we were doing this, this program was actually existed only in 2 of our sample districts, in Gaya and in Nalanda. And you find these effects hugely in the Mahadalit radio program as well. And the Mahadalit radio program is essentially cash-free. There is no cash involved being transacted out here. People get coupons, which they then redeem for radios at a particular at a government-organized shivir camp. Okay, so I am not comfortable with just saying this is all about helping people of his own caste and getting sort of rent-seeking and getting access to these sort of funds and things out of that. This is not purely a sort of bribery kind of story either. Okay, so actually I had a few more slides, but in the interest of time, I'll stop here. This is really, I should have said this right at the beginning, this is work in progress, as is probably quite evident. But why I think it's great for me to be presenting out here is I would really like some feedback and thoughts on what you think actually is going on out here. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Can we have Mr. Abhinav with his points?
I'll be very brief. Thank you very much for this great presentation. Couple of points, like, I'm not going to just talk about what you have, but I'm rather trying to fill the gap, what you don't have. First of all, just for the information, this is the first, this program is the first in India. So Bihar implemented this first in India. That's one. And second, yesterday Professor Subramaniam was talking about inequality, and that is heart of this topic, inequality among the poorest of the poor. Objectively, if we see that if some people are getting help because of Vikas Mitra program, very likely they are going to be better off compared to the people who didn't get help. So that's the very logical thing to say. And the question Himanshu was asking, whether belonging to the same jati as Vikas Mitra helps. Maybe the best answer we can get only when we see the counterfactual, which we cannot. From the research point of view, it is very hard to see. But you were asking about whether it's a corruption story or whether it's a story about one person helping his same jati. I would say that there is also the big element of conflict within the villages. That also plays an important role. I have been studying some conflict literature lately, and Indian villages are, they have conflicts among the same caste, among different castes, and conflict is a big story right now. Many people are working on conflict. So that's one. Second, the other question is, this program is basically, they have about 20 schemes, 21 subcaste and 20 schemes. You are focusing on one. But the other very important scheme was Mahadalit Awas Bhumi Yojana, purchase of land. Remember that we are talking about mostly landless people. So for them, purchase of land is very important. I've been, I looked up a report, and report says, there was a big problem in this particular yojana also. First of all, the allocated land purchase was about 3 decimal per household, which is very, very less to come up with a decent house. Maybe, decent, of course, it's a very subjective term. But 3 decimal it's pretty bad. Now, coming to the fundamental problems with those programs, insufficient funds. Not every district has same amount or same proportion of funds for these programs. Now, that will definitely affect. My hunch is that, since I haven't seen your data, but Gaya and Nalanda, they are going to have a better access, one, information, and second, very likely the funds compared to your other 2 districts. And also, Saharsa also has this data which you don't have in your sample. Saharsa has this information which you were looking for in the 4 districts. Other than that, I happened to meet a couple of Vikas Mitra last year, and the thing that one of the major problems they have raised is we don't get proper training. Even if we are trained officials who are supposed to help us, like if we are forwarding application to officials, they are not very sensitive. They don't have all the information. Even if we have information, they don't have all the information. You're absolutely right about the high stakes of Indira Awas Yojana because of the cash transfer involved. That does change the preferences, of course. And in that case, helping your own jati will go longer, will go a way forward. Another thing is monitoring is pretty weak. Again, that was very much in the report. I have read a Huck's paper, and they are talking about monitoring aspect also. And finally, we need to have more data. Like 4 districts, and that to 2 districts which are very close to Patna, that is not doing real justice to this kind of study. So, we need to have more diverse geographical representations of the districts. And finally, it was, I was looking at the qualification, educational qualifications, required educational qualifications of Vikas Mitra. One thing which struck me, if you can be 5th pass, so hypothetically, if a 5th pass male person gets Vikas Mitra job, how in earth he can pass class 10th exam in 3 years? So we are talking about very likely a different Vikas Mitra. So, that is something which doesn't make any sense. So I'll stop here, but definitely it's a very good work, and definitely it's a work in progress, maybe more data, and if somehow we can come up with some counterfactual, that will help this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Couple of questions if somebody from the audience would like. Then, yeah, please.
Awas Sayuk, I believe, was initiated maybe 2 years back. Yeah, Awas Sayuk. And how does that, I'm just wondering if that's had an impact. The other thing you might want to look at is there's an informal survey that's often done at the time when Indra Awas is allocated, which, because they have to, even though it's done by serially, by the BPL list, it could be that the household's already received Indra Awas, it could be they've shipped it out of the village, and so there's this informal survey that's done. So what's the role of the Vikas Mitra in that? Because that might be the key to understanding this.
Could I just take some of these questions? Then I'll just forget, even though I'm trying to write it down. I'll actually take it in reverse order. The survey, yes, in fact, that's one of the precisely the points where the Vikas Mitra is involved. He's supposed to help winnow out the households which have moved out, things of that sort, verify the households that are there. In some of the districts, when I did my survey, the Vikas Mitra has been given a camera. Each Vikas Mitra has been given a camera, and they're supposed to take a photograph which is used to verify whether they've done enough construction. Of the first stage, the Indra Awas is given in 2 stages, and the second stage is conditional on having constructed up to the lintel level. So he's supposed to take that photograph and all, so he's very, very involved with that part of it. And so you're right. I mean, there may be a fair amount of discretion being excised out there, Right. Yeah, my sense is that he cannot really add any households. From my interviews at the time, I didn't get the sense that he can add any people, but he can eliminate households which, which are false or whatever for some reason. The Awas Ayuk, sorry, I'm not really aware of this position, but it sounds like that's to do with the housing rather than with the Vikas Mitra's direct work. So there may be overlaps in their work because the Vikas Mitra is just this, he's at the beck and call of everyone, frankly.
Just to add on this, Awas Mitra, that is from the Rural Development Department to aid the Indra Awas, the rural housing program, to facilitate that. Vikas Mitra specifically to the Mahadalit on all government programs. So the Awas Ayukt is basically for the rural housing program, in order to facilitate the entire process. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks for the
I think choosing this Indra Awas. I think choosing Indra Awas, I think in a way is not very proper. Actually, why? Last year, my village person, his house fell in the rainy season. I tried to find out whether he can get Indra Awas. I couldn't help him because the list is so tight. It doesn't depend on Vikas Mitra. Every person, eligible person, is listed as per points. This is 42, point number 9 or 10 or whatever. List is so thoroughly made by the government, of course with the help of all kinds of volunteers, that there can't be any heresy in this. I think the role of Vikas Mitra is very limited in helping his community. He can facilitate filling up, going to the bank, that's fine. But number-wise, he can't help anybody. It's other benefits where probably flexibility is more. Here I think nobody can help. When the Rural Development Secretary will not be able to get one Indira house constructed in the district easily. I mean, I think it will be very tough for him. So he can't get any Indira house because the list is properly made, so tight that this Vikas Mitra will not be able to help him. Its other benefits where effectiveness of functioning of that functionary should be judged and not Indira house.
Perhaps, but my sense from the interviews, etc., was that there's a lot of migration in these villages, lots of situations when it's unclear whether the family still continues to live there or not. And so there is some amount of this, and there's maybe not in the first stage, but in the second stage, this question of whether you had constructed, whether you had properly utilized the first stage funds to construct the house. I think that gives, I heard anecdotal stories of people getting their photographs taken, because the system of having a photograph taken in front of your house has been there for a long time, but people getting their photograph taken in front of their neighbor's house, to show that. So I think there are sort of really these subtle ways in which the system can be.
In the villages, they know that their number is coming next year, because they are falling at 46, and they have got only 20 Indira Awas this year, so they can get Indira Awas only next year. So that's very important.
Yeah. I'll take Aditya's question.
The last question, and then we conclude.
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu. It was very interesting. I was just wondering, if you think about this entire program, there's clearly political overtones in the sense that why the past ones were excluded and all the other castes were included, right? So clearly, this is actually a political project by the JDU. Do you perhaps have data on the parties to which the beneficiaries belong to? Because perhaps it could be the case that instead of a caste alignment story, you have actually a party alignment story in terms of probably supporters of the JDU being benefited more than of the other parties, or perhaps voters more likely to vote in the next election being favored by the Vikas Mitra, and that perhaps might explain why you see outside your own village, people being supported in the program. That could be a confounder that you might want to consider.
Yeah, please. Then we can.
Still more questions.
I'm sorry, we are running out of time. I think the next session is on. So he might respond and then we conclude. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, Aditya. This is, it's a political, there's a political story as well. I mean, the census data makes it clear that the Dusads are squat in the middle of the socioeconomic outcomes. And so it's not obvious from a purely economic standpoint why they should have been excluded, while Dhobis should have been included, or even Chamars being included, right? And at the level of the village, yeah, I mean, I think that's a project waiting to be done, to look at the political alignment. I can't profess to have actually done that. Of course, one hears a lot of stories in the field about how this whole Mahadalit project was just a way for the ruling government to get the votes of the Musahars and reduce the degree of radicalization and support for Naxalism amongst those groups. But I really can't make very much more informed remarks than that. I would actually just like to respond to all the wonderful comments that I got from Avinash. I'm trying to work back through this. You mentioned educational qualifications, and yes, it's a hard task because they have been asked to try and pass, class 10 over a period of 3 years or so. That said, I found it rather interesting that, and we saw that in our comparison between Chamar and Musahar Vikas Mitras. But in my regression as well, I've got Vikas Mitra education there. And I fully expected a negative coefficient, a significant negative coefficient out there, which I don't get. So it seems like the Vikas Mitras are able to do their work. In the case of male Vikas Mitras, it's almost invariably the Vikas Mitra himself who is working, whatever I saw in the survey. Yes, of course, in the case of women, there's a practice of both the man and the woman, going out together in the panchayat. And I can make some interesting commentary out there because there's, of course, work being done on those sorts of issues about who is the real pradhan, and there's the Duflo paper and so on. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to look at. Monitoring is very weak. Vikas Mitra training is lacking. I fully take those points. I think indeed the primary problem has been that there was supposed to be an entire administrative setup, which had the Vikas Mitra at the bottom, but people above him, appointed by the Vikas mission, the Bihar Mahadalit Vikas mission, and that has been stuck for a very long time. So in that process, the Vikas Mitras have de facto ended up being under the BDO, and there has been a lot of actually official letters going back and forth between the Mahadalit Vikas mission and the district magistrates, with the Vikas mission saying, these people have been appointed for only the Mahadalit programs, please do not use them for any other program, So they're sort of overburdened with a lot of all sorts of government programs, which are being social security, social welfare programs being run by the government, and they're very poorly sort of trained, is my sense. Yes, there's certainly that. The Awas Bhumi Yojana is, I'm glad you brought it up. That was actually, when I had first requested funds from IGC, that was exactly the program that I had wanted to study. When I did my pilot, I could find almost nobody who actually had received Awas Bhumi Yojana benefits, which made it a little hard to construct an entire study on that. But I am working on actually the Awas Bhumi Yojana, and hopefully by next year I'll have something substantive to say about it. But it's a very, very fascinating program, of giving homestead land, I think potentially very empowering. Thank you. Sorry if I didn't cover something.
Thank you. We had quite a interesting and informative discussion.
I, Engineer Ravindra Thakur, I want to draw the attention towards the Indira Awas. Indira Awas has become
yeah. Thank you. On the energy sector, especially the key challenges before the state is to address the technical and commercial losses. On the technical side, I think a lot of infrastructure projects are in the pipeline, and the state has to look at it, and probably like over the coming years they have to address the technical losses, because technical and commercial losses put together, it's 42%. If we need to have a sustainable system of providing energy to people, so the DISCOMs and the entire energy sector has to be revenue neutral. So on that front, I think RLSS, Revenue Linked Supply Scheme, Maharashtra has done it really effectively. There has been very positive results in Maharashtra. And the other part is Bihar is largely an agrarian economy. So on the agriculture load front also a lot of work needs to be done. And on that front only a recent program has come in where agriculture feeder separation is proposed. That will actually help improving the agricultural load. So I suppose with these two things being in a focused way taken forward, with adequate generation and transmission and distribution infrastructure being built up, on the energy sector I think it will go a long way in alleviating poverty and improving the overall economic status. And the other presentation, which was on Mahadalits, over the last 10 years I have worked in various capacities in various districts. This has been one of the very good initiatives by the government, and definitely based on anecdotal and perception, we were of the impression that Mahadalit Vikas Mitra were contributing positively to improve the economic level or to improve the reach of the government programs to the Mahadalits. They are the poorest of the poor. I think this particular study has brought out key issues to the front. I think as suggested, maybe with few more studies and with a larger data, that could bring out more actionable points wherein the policymakers have to think and probably like tweak and improve the program a little more so that it is more effective and results in the desired benefits to be delivered to the Mahadalits. I would like to thank the panelists, Mr. Nick Rayan, Mr. Himanshu Kumar, and Mr. Abhinav for taking their time out and sharing their views on these subjects. Thank you.